Hi there everybody, my name's Sean Walton. I'm a lecturer at Swansea University and I run the web development course there. So this is a video which is going to show you how to set up an ASP.NET Core application, and depending on how much time I have, I might make a few more videos showing you how to do things. Now the .Core 1.0 came out I think last year or a few years ago, and it's changed a lot of the ways that ASP.NET MVC work. So on my channel at the moment there are a bunch of videos that show you how to make like a MVC application, but that was using MVC 5, whereas this is going to be using MVC Core. So there are some fundamental changes which I think are all for the better. I quite like the new framework, but the downside is I'm having to re-record a lot of videos. I'm having to completely rewrite my entire module. So I teach this at Swansea University, and if you like it, if you like this, the way I'm teaching this, then and you haven't, this is actually on the master's course, so you should go over to Swansea Uni and see if you'd be interested in coming on board. So I'm going to start by launching Visual Studio 2017. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to install Visual Studio, but when you install it, you'll be asked like what work packages you want to install, and you want to make sure you get everything that is in the web area. There's like a tick box that just says install web stuff. Something else is that I'm using .Core 1.0. You can get .NET Core 2.0, and you can download that SDK and use it, but that's something you'd have to download separately, whereas I want to, for my course, I'm going to be asking students, so if you're on my course, to submit using .NET Core 1.0. And that's what you get as default when you download Visual Studio. So what I want to show you today is actually like starting with an empty project, building up an MVC application. And you might be thinking, Sean, well, why can't I just use the templates? Well, you can use the templates, but the problem is the templates sometimes go wrong. And when things go wrong, if you don't understand like the little bits and pieces that are making things work, then you're not going to be as good at debugging things. Hence why I want to teach you this as well. I apologize if I'm drinking, but I'm drinking. Right, so we want to start. I've also got notes, which normally I would do this, I'm almost blind, but this is all quite new to me as well. So yeah, if things go wrong, I'm going to leave it in the video because I think that that's an important learning tool. So we want to do a new project, and you can see if you haven't got all these templates, then you probably you might need to install them, do various things, and what we want is we're going to use .NET Core, and we want a .NET Core web application. We can also get there through web. Now, using .NET framework, that would be using the kind of older version of MVC, which is what all the other videos on my channel explain how to use. But for what we want to do is use .NET Core. Now, one advantage of this is that this is something now that you can use multi-platform, so you can develop these applications on whatever you want. So let's call this our application. I don't know. We'll stick with Pokemon, and I'm going to put it in my root, which is a bad idea, but at least I know where it is. Okay, right, just put it there. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as it is, and then on this one, so if you wanted to have use the templates, then you would select Web API, Web Application. Interestingly, in .NET Core, there isn't a distinction really between the Web API and the Web Application. It's to do with the way the controller classes are set up. So it's interesting that they have the two different templates. I guess the templates make sense. Okay, so I'm going to create an empty project. So I'm going to click OK. And so this is going to basically create, so we literally is an empty project. You can see I haven't got any folders, but there are some files in here from the start. Now the first thing that I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at the project settings file. I kind of want to show you what you have in an empty project. So here you can see if I right click on my project, I've got edit Pokemon CS Proj. Now this CS Proj is where a lot of the settings of your application are going to be set up. It replaces things like the project.json file. So you might find tutorials that say to you, go change the project.json file. Now that is included in this CS Proj file. And even tutorials that were made for ASP.NET Core may refer to a project.json because a lot of tutorials, people started making the tutorials before the final release candidate was, or things have changed is my point. It's a fast moving thing. Now folders that we have, so there is one folder here actually, which is the www root folder. And if you don't believe me that that's a folder, here it is in Explorer. So the root folder is actually the root of your website. So MVC and the MVC framework, if you're not clear, is not a file-based framework. Like a lot of people, when they first come to working in web applications, they're used to setting up websites where the address that you type in the URL bar is refers to basically a file. So that you type in the address and you'll go into that exact file. In MVC, that's not what happens. So you type in the URL in the URL bar, and that URL is interpreted by a piece of software running on the server. And then there's a thing called the routing engine, which takes that string and then decides what code to run on the server and then what response to give you as the user. But this actually is a way of just putting files in that will be in the root. And you would put in there any kind of static files. So maybe your CSS and that kind of thing. So we've also got our program CS, which is actually this is what we'll be running on the server to actually start our web application working. So this is our main. And then a file that's going to be very important is our startup file. Now, our startup file is where we'll configure things called middleware. And what's quite nice, even with an empty project like this, there are documentation links that you can click on. And something I would suggest is that you get used to using the documentation. That's going to be really important for you moving forward, is being able to learn how to use that, because these things change. And probably one of the most important methods in this class is the configure method. Now let's have a look at what happens when we run this application. So I'm going to run IIS Express. So that started up a server, and then that server then is running this, and we get a hello world. And the reason we get a hello world is because of this this line here. So if I exit that, so what's happened is that we've actually run. So our application builder is running a await context.response.write async, and this context is our HTTP context, which will become more. That's something you're going to be seeing a lot of. Now, if we comment this out and save it, I can run it again, and we get nothing. And in fact, if we look at the developer tools console, see we've got a 404 not found. So basically no response from the server. Sorry, no, the server has responded with 404 not found, not no response from the server. And the reason that is because there's nothing happening, right? There's actually nothing on here that's going to be presenting. There's no pages for the application to find, so it's just saying, well, I don't know what to do. And it's passing back the 404 not found. So I'm going to uncomment that. So if you're interested, so like to make this actually work as a web application beyond just putting a string on the screen, we actually end up needing to add middleware. And so this here is actually an example of middleware that's being added called the use developer exception page. You tend to see that if we're adding middleware, we see the word use on the method will start. So for example, I happen to know that there's some middleware called use welcome page. So I'm going to put in that use welcome page and I'm going to run the web application again. And there we have this welcome page. Okay, so your ASP.NET, and there's a link to learning stuff, which will then take us to an external website. So that's what this middleware has done. We've kind of injected this middleware into our application, and now it's taking you to the welcome page. Notice that this then didn't do anything because we injected the welcome page middleware before. If I put that here, we get the hello world because that is what executed first. We got to hello world, it never got to the use welcome page. And so you might end up, so middleware can be used for things like adding exception handling, which you could use for like custom error messages. But we're going to start by actually adding MVC to the project. And the way that we're going to do that is through the NuGet package manager. Now, the package manager, the NuGet package manager is really good, and it's something you're going to be using again and again and again. I prefer to use the package manager through right-clicking on the project name and then going to manage NuGet packages, and then you get a GUI. And what's quite nice about this is it's easier to select the version here. I'm just going to save this. So we want to install MVC. So I'm going to go to browse, and this is actually getting these off the internet. Now we want to go to Microsoft, and I happen to know that it's called ASP.NET Core MVC. Something to watch out for is because we're using two things to watch out for. The first thing is a lot of these packages, if I just searched for MVC, you would see the most popular package is ASP.NET MVC. That is the MVC framework using the .NET, not .NET Core. So you want to be looking for the ASP.NET Core MVC. And Microsoft never seem to be able to do search properly. So Microsoft. So there we go. So we've got ASP.NET Core. Now, the other thing to watch out for, the current version is 2.0, which this requires that you're targeting .NET Core 2.0. We are targeting 1.0, so I'm going to change it down to the latest version for Core 1.0. So I'm going to install that. And what it will do, it will go out, it will get these packages, and it will figure out what dependencies those packages need. So if any of you use Linux and you're used to installing things from repositories, it's exactly the same kind of thing. It's doing all the hard work for you. So it's going to ask you to review the changes. So I'm going to say OK, accepting the licenses. And what's nice is the package manager doesn't just have Microsoft packages on here. It also has packages by other people. And so people have made some quite useful things on there. So if we now go to our Solution Explorer, we can look on dependencies. And we can see we've got the ASP.NET Core MVC. And in the SDK, well, that's probably the same. And the other thing we can look at is we can look at the CS proj, and we've got a package reference now for MVC. And so that's gone in here. The next thing, like at the moment, like we've installed it, but we're not actually using it. So we need to add MVC to our application. And the way that we do that is we first add it to our services. So we go services.add MVC. So middleware tends to use the keyword use, and services tend to use add. Now, this is telling us there's a problem, so we want to, why is this not working? Services.add MVC. I'm wondering if it's not using Microsoft.ASP netcore.mvc. Right, I don't think this is recognizing that I've got MVC installed. I'm going to restart Visual Studio. I'm going to open my project again. Okay, I think this is now okay, so I'm just going to check. Yeah, so, yeah, okay. So sometimes you'll find Visual Studio, sometimes these kind of things happen, you need to restart. I probably could have also got away with building the project then. That might have been another way to get the IntelliSense working. And then the next, so we've added the service, so now we can actually add the middleware that's going to do the, that's going to make the MVC work. So we'll do that app.use MVC with default root. Now, either in this video or in a later video, I'll explain what that means. But now we're set up for MVC. Now at the moment, I'm not sure. I think well, we'll see what happens. It's probably going to give us, I'm not going to guess. Okay, so it's going to go to, it'll go to hello world, right? Because nothing at the moment, we're not actually like using the MVC at all. I'm going to comment this out anyway. Like you can delete that from your project. That's absolutely fine. So now we've installed the middleware, but it's still not completely set up. The next thing we need to do is create the correct folders for MVC. So I'm going to right click on Pokemon and then we're going to add a folder, and we need to create a models folder, a views folder, and a controllers folder. So I'm not going to talk about the specific, like the MVC pattern in this video. I'm just getting it to work. That's something you should, there's lots of other videos out there that will explain that to you. So what we're going to do is set up a simple controller to do something. So I'm going to right click on the controllers folder, add, and then controller. The other thing I could do as well is I could go new item and then MVC, is it on here? MVC controller class. And if you notice immediately it's called this home controller. And the reason it's done that is because with the default routing, so the routing, if you remember earlier I said that the URL in your browser, when you've got an MVC web application, it's not pointing to a file. That string, that URL is being interpreted on the server, and then a routing engine is deciding what controller action to call, which a controller will be a class, and then an action will be a method in that class. So by default, using the default route, if our URL is just the root of our application, it will go to the home controller. So it's cleverly figured out we need a home controller. So I'm going to add that. So the controller class, and again, like we right clicked on that and created it through there, but all the, like we could have just created a normal class and set this up ourselves. It's basically a class that inherits the controller class, and it returns an iAction result. And this iAction result is kind of what does the response to the browser. So by default, it's put in an index action. Like, why do we think, what, you know, have a think about why that is. If you've used, you know, if you've been on the internet for, I think most people will get the idea that index.html is like the default page that that your browser will go to in a root. And this is the same kind of convention being followed here. So this, if you just go to the root of the web directory, it will go to the home controller and it will go to the index. And here it's actually returning a view. So, which is a type of iAction, it's a view result, which is a type of iAction result. It's got an iAction result. So iAction result is an interface, and view implements that is a type of that interface. So if we run it now, in fact, what I might do, I'm going to do a little test to show you something. So I'm just going to return, I'm going to comment this out. What if I return hello from the index? So I'm just going to return a string, because it's not going to like that. Okay, let's not worry about that right now. Forget I did that. Let's do the view. So let's run it, see what happens. Okay, so we get an exception because the view index was not found. And what's interesting, it's telling you the follow set locations were searched. Views home index, views shared index. So we need to add a view. So I'm going to go to the views folder. And the way that the conventions work is that in the views folder, we need to have a folder for each controller. So I'm going to put home here. And then I'm going to go add new item, MVC view page, and it's because it realizes the convention, it's automatically named as index. So here is our view. I'm just going to delete this, some HTML, and let's have a body, and let's just have a let's have a heading one. Let's call it index. Okay, now we've been directed to this index view. So the views actually use the Razor engine. So like you need to learn how to use Razor. So the next thing we need then, so we've got a controller, we've got a view, let's have a model. So let's add a class. We're going to call this Pokemon. I'm going to call it Pokemon Card. I don't like the idea of having a class name the same as the project name, which probably was, I should have named the project something different. So let's add that. I'm going to add a couple of, so this is going to be our model. A model is just a class. It's where our data is stored, or it's how we define our data. So we want to, let's just have prop. I can type in PRO and we'll get property. So if I tab that, then it's an easy kind of template for setting up a property in a class. So let's have a string, name, and then prop string. Is it color or element? Let's have a look. What do Pokemons have? They have If you hear any drilling, I'm sorry. I live on a building site. Right, Pokemon Wikipedia. Also, my internet's really slow. Probably not going to find it on here. Nope. I'm going to say color. I can't remember what it's called. Health. Oh no. Oh, screw it. Okay, so let's just call that color. Or I feel like element. Anyway, so there's our class, which is in our models folder. So the next thing we want to do is let's get our controller to actually make a new class. So we want to let's first input the namespace. So using models, no, we want Pokemon.models is fine. So then we should be able to put Pokemon card card equals new Pokemon card, and then we're going to just give some default values. So name, let's get this right. I don't know how to spell Pokemon names. Pokemon Pikachu. There must be a Pokemon database, right? There we go. Good. So type, yeah, type is the thing. Right, let's get this right then. Let's not miss. Okay. So this gives me a chance to show you a cool feature in Visual Studio. So let's first name. I don't want to spell this wrong. Pikachu. And then we want. I call it color equals an electric. And then that's not right. Okay, so what's kind of cool is I can click on this and I can rename it, and it will rename this property everywhere in the project where it's referenced, which is super useful. Like, there's so many times that saves, like, that will save you so much time throughout your development life. Okay, so I'm creating. So in my index action, I'm creating a Pokemon card, and then I'm returning a view. At the moment, the view just says index, but I want to actually return this card, and so we can reference the model. So we can actually, so the view, if we look, it's got like 3 overloads, which it's not showing me. View, right? So if I look in the overloads, I can pass an object. A general object, which is the model. So I can pass the Pokemon card to the view. Okay, so I can do all my business with the Pokemon card that I need to, and then I can pass it to the view. And the view's job is all about displaying this information to the user. That's the view's only job, and that's all we do in the view. But we need to tell the view what to do with it. So the first thing is we need to tell the view what type of model it can expect. So we need to import, so model is going to be Pokemon.models.Pokemon card. So this is telling, I don't need that because it's Razor. So this is telling the view to expect a Pokemon card as an input. So then what we can do is we can say index, and we can say, let's have a paragraph, Pokemon name is, and then we can do @model dot name, and then we'll do, let's just do another type. Also, if I've spelled Pokemon wrong, I'm really sorry. Model dot type. Okay, let's run this. So there we go. So it's returning this information to the view. So in the Razor, what's happening? So the @ symbol tells Razor that you're switching to C#. So Razor is like this kind of amalgamation of C# and HTML, which works really well, and it's really clever the way it interprets it, because it looks at the characters and it figures out. It has to do, like, if you ever want an exercise, kind of try and think about how it does this. How many characters ahead does the Razor engine have to look to decide whether or not this is meant to be C#, for example? How does it know that the C# finishes there and that now we're going back into HTML? So the @ symbol starts with the C#, and we've imported the model. We define the model up here, the first line, and we might be importing things like tag helpers up here. So you can almost like you can even have like using. So it's very much like the top part of a C# class. And then we're saying Pokemon name equals @model. So the model that was passed in as an argument to the view here, dot name. And then what it does is it's doing HTML encoding. It's making sure that this is like safe to present to the user. So there's no, like, it takes away the risk of cross-site scripting. There is a slight caveat. You need to be careful if you're using this in a JavaScript, because you can also write JavaScript in here. So that's something to bear in mind, that this is HTML encoded, not JavaScript encoded. And then type, and that's it. It's that simple. So you can imagine this is like what I've shown you here is the basic kind of nuts and bolts of MVC. And then from that, you're building a C# application that will work as a web application, and that's kind of it. So all of our kind of data stuff we can do in our model class. Eventually we'll learn how to access databases using the entity framework. Then we've got our controllers to do things like maybe check if you're authorized to see this, to do validations on any data that the user's entered. And then the view simply makes that look nice, and it has our UI in it and things like that. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, obviously like and subscribe and all that stuff. I'm going to possibly do some other videos based on this. If you're on my course, like, I'll be going through this in lectures. If you're not on this course, let me know if you want me to bother making those videos. I wanted to have an introduction on here because there are other really good videos on YouTube that explain how to do all this, but they're a bit out of date in terms of the current framework, hence why I want to put this on there. So thanks for watching.